I want to re-emphasize, what Dr. Wu mentioned a few times in his presentation, that these are options, these are recommendations, after having had an opportunity to look at what seems to be working best out there right now of how to govern such a VIP school. So he basically made that point very clear. This is no different. The key issue here regarding finance is transferring the money from one agency, one federal agency from Washington, the BIE, the Bureau of Education, to transfer funds from the BIE down to Navajo. So one of the initial questions that we had, we're not talking beyond once it gets to Window Rock. You have ISEP. You have all these different ways of spending the money once it gets to your school, or once it gets transferred from Window Rock to the individual schools. This section is more about how to transfer the funds from Washington to Window Rock, the Quaggy, as John. And as we talk to people in Washington to get some advice, then we talk to people in Window Rock. And asking them, what's foremost in your thought? What jumps at you to move this money from one agency to another agency? Keep in mind that Washington, what their response was that there's already in existence, there's already legislation in existence. That's Public Law 100-297 and 93-638. There's what's called self-governance. That's where you hear about Navajo having self-governance with Indian Health Service, Fort Defiance, self-governance set up, Indian Health Service Hospital in Tuba City, and I believe in Winslow. Other tribes have really taken advantage of that also. Using that self-governance vehicle. So, in talking to Washington and asking what jumps at you, asking that similar kind of a question to people in Window Rock from Budget and Finance and also the OMB office, what comes out at you? And one of the concepts that came out was a single grant concept. Single grant, and what that basically means is that Navajo becomes that single grantee. Navajo becomes the single grantee. As Harvey mentioned in so many different ways, you have the nation, the Navajo nation. That's where this concept of self-determination comes in. Washington, we're trying to encourage tribes to practice and implement elements of self-determination. So this is no different that same way when you think about it. It's giving the prerogative to the Navajo Nation to exercise an element of self-determination, self-governance. One of the ways you can do that is through a single grant option. Okay? That's a single grant option. So then, Navajo would assume that role of being the single grantee. Okay? Instead of you going to Washington dealing directly with BIE, now you have your own government, the very government that you are a part of. Put them in that role of making decisions about how the finance system should be set up. That's the main thrust, okay? That is the main thrust of everything you have up there. There may be some elements, there may be some points in there. For example, number 2 and number 3 were by changing, by inventing nas asgo, particularly in um, 100-297, that we can make it even work better. And that's an option that we gave to Window. If you keep looking at it, you can find ways to make some additional amendments. So Ade Kunya from Washington, if you can find a better way to set this system up, we're open to those suggestions on the So on some cases, in Washington, national in Window Rock, don't need our faith. Don't need on some cases it's that option. That's where I think that people like John McCain, Senator John McCain, and others I mentioned earlier, Congress and the Senate and the House, and I'm sure from anyone around and with Barack Obama's office, as long as there's accountability involved in that. If we can account for those funding, I like the comment that Matt ended with here at the bottom of his presentation. How are the monies being spent? Okay? How are the monies being spent? That's the driving force. I should say one of the driving force that I know Barack Obama hears every day are the money being spent wisely. If you saw some of the reason as to why there was a change in a lot more Republicans being elected to Congress and the Senate this past election, is because people thought that Republicans are better at accounting how monies are being spent. My money, not knowing that sort of thinking is, I think jumping on. There are some areas in there. I've been on their own analysis, BIE's own analysis. And it came out that sometimes the BIE director didn't have a lot of discretionary authority to be able to reach somewhere and come up with some money to help a school board, to help someone in an emergency situation. That's a part of that lack of discretionary allocation. So one of the recommendations, one of the options that we're recommending to Window Rock is that you guys should find a way to address that. So you don't get caught in that same situation. The Navajo school district system that the we already have a policy in place of how to address it. The ICEP, as I mentioned earlier, is not a big issue here because we're mainly talking about transferring the money from one agency to another, which is Window Rock. But I think in terms of just ICEP, one of the key elements in here, when Matt was making that comparison about how much money we spend per pupil, per student, they told you, it wasn't getting any though. In any kind of a school system that you see, particularly in public schools, I think you have a student count. If you have 40 students in a school, you get a certain amount of money based on that 40 students. ISAP doesn't quite work that way, what we found out. It doesn't quite operate the same way as per pupil spending supposed to work. So part of our recommendation is that you should change that. You should find a way to make it so that it works that way. That's how the states, everybody else, that's how they determine how much money a school gets. So that's why the student count becomes a very, very important. Then in addition to that, those add-ons for special considerations like special ed, and in some cases, bus routes. Kojiki in the state, a school gets reimbursed by how many kids get on the bus and how far that bus travels. And then in addition to that, if those buses ride on paved road or unpaved roads, you don't have that assistance here in the BIE. It's just a one-time allocation to you without consideration of some of these things. So suggesting to Winterrod that these are some things you should look at. And let me tell you, these are the same kinds of ideas and thoughts that actually came from talking to some of your people and talking to people in Albuquerque, Washington as well, getting feedback from them. So, the main thing is how to transfer. And I know that there's a lot of rumors. There's a lot of miscommunication. The one that we're really looking at here is how to transfer the money from one agency, BIE, down to Winterrod. So, from what we saw so far, it looks like the best mechanism and the easiest mechanism without having to go back to before Congress and ask them to make new legislation or to develop a different kind of legislation. It seems that the best option and the easiest and the quickest is a single grant option. And then keep in mind that Winterrod becomes that. The board that you elect